up, sexy people? It is Dave. It's Duncan back from Metal Epidemic for another album review. For this review, Duncan and I have been checking out the new album from world-renowned American death metal icons, NILE. The band's new album, The Underworld Awaits Us All, will be released on August 23rd via Napalm Records. So, the extreme metal Egyptologists, NILE, have returned. You sure?
Egyptology is the study of Egypt. So yeah. Sorry, sorry for knowing shit.
Oh, you said it is a word.
No, I said it is a word. Yeah, Egyptology is the study of Egypt.
You're like, not a word.
Don't get me started on their music. Let's just focus on these things here. I mean, if they're lying about the profession, Dave, then what else are they lying about? No, Egyptology is the study of Egypt. Yeah.
Good, good. Glad we've clarified. 100% a word. Press release is
Although
fine.
I'm fairly sure that I might be wrong. I don't want to cast aspersions, but are the Egyptologists, are the self-proclaimed Egyptologists because they sing about things to do with, or are they, Dave, in denial? Well,
God damn it.
it was worth it. Like everything for that 1.5 minutes was worth the payoff.
Yeah.
Check, please.
Beautiful.
Check. It's not a restaurant.
They have returned with album number 10, The Underworld Awaits Us All, facing the planet's inevitable end with their die-hard fans at their side. NILE waste absolutely no time.
Do they know something we don't?
Maybe. They're Egyptologists, Duncan. They know shit. With no time with histrionics on The Underworld Awaits Us All, distilling their trademark Egyptology-driven tempest down to its most streamlined essence. Throughout its 11 pummeling tracks and intricate interludes, NILE masters full tilt speed and ferocious musicality. 30 years into their heavy reign, The Underworld Awaits Us All proves that NILE is marching onward and undoubtedly upward, bleeding metal for their fandom for as long as the sands of time will allow. Once again, the album was produced and recorded at Carl Sanders' own Serpent-Headed Studios in Greenville, South Carolina. The band returned to Vile Melodic Rights engineer Mark Lewis, who has worked with Cannibal Corpse, Dying Fetus and Whitechapel for mixing and mastering.
Carl Sanders, do you think any relation to the Colonel?
I mean...
Master of recording bands, wait, he tries fried chicken.
You never know, Duncan, you never know.
Yeah, I mean...
I didn't know Egyptology was a word until 3 minutes ago. You know what I mean?
Really? You don't like history at school, I can tell in your face.
I was a geography guy at school.
Oh, I hated geography. It's really funny because I do geography for a living now. And you do history. No, you don't. 100% don't. Can I ask you a question before we get into this?
You can ask me a question, Duncan.
Because of all my friends that were in heavier music, you were, I'm not going to say an early adopter of death metal, but in terms of our circle of friends, you seem to be very much like finger on the pulse with what was kind of current, fresh. I'm not going to say trendy, but good is probably the right word in death metal from like late 90s through. So you were pretty much on the train.
Yeah.
I know it existed back to the 80s, but who gives a fuck, right? Let's run late 90s through.
Okay.
NILE obviously land in a kind of, in that 90s bracket moving forward. But I always get the feeling that NILE maybe wasn't given the same spotlight as your Morbid Angels, your Cannibal Corpses, etc., etc. Were you a late adopter to NILE or an early adopter? Because why did I get the feeling that I never heard you mention much in the way of anything at NILE until about the mid-2000s? So,
well, I weirdly, I didn't actually realise this until just recently. I started following this band fairly close to the start of their career. I'll take you back in time for a little bit of story for you.
With these, when bands have got history and we've been with them for a while and listened to a lot of their stuff, I think context plays it, especially when you talk about where it sits 30 years into their career. So.
Yeah. So back in the day, I had a little stint working in an electrical goods store, shall we say. Um, not using any names, but
Most mafia term. Yeah, I work in waste management. I worked in an electrical goods store.
electrical goods store. I was working there part time whilst we were finishing our college course. The two of us, obviously, we met at college, and one of the guys that I worked with at this electrical goods store, my good buddy Ross. We when I first started working there, I found out that he was into kind of heavy music and stuff. So we started kind of passing CDs back and forth. And this is like over 20 years ago. And he was like, Dave, one day he was like, Dave, have you heard of this band NILE? I was like, nah.
Sounds like some straight up Egyptology shit.
Funny you should ask, but never heard. I was like, no, never heard of these guys before. And we were both into kind of more kind of extreme side of things, so we'd pass back bits and pieces of different death metal. But he was a wee bit older than me, so he had that kind of knowledge from kind of like prior, like kind of like early 90s, late 80s in the kind of death metal scene. So he handed me a copy of Black Seeds of Vengeance, which was Nile's 2000 album.
Right, so still relatively early into their career then.
Yeah, and I had never heard anything like this. When I heard Black Seeds of Vengeance, I was like, not only was I blown away with the kind of levels of like technicality and the kind of heaviness that they brought to the table, but I'd never heard like extreme music paired with like an Egyptian theme. Like that was just like something completely new. So I felt like when I heard it, I was like, this is kind of like almost like innovative for its time. And I actually think, listening back to it now, I think these guys were way ahead of their time, to be honest. That album made me go back and check out their first album, which was the one before, Amongst the Catacombs of Nephron Ka, from 1998. And that album, I still believe to this day that is an underrated classic death metal album. I love that album. Just the first album, it was just raw aggression, like a real kind of like blunt force trauma kind of sound. It was a bit shorter than Black Seeds of Vengeance, a bit more kind of groovy, stripped back even. And then over time, you could hear their albums, started to get a little bit more technical. Their last album, Vile Nilotic Rites, I thought it was a good album. I thought it was solid. I didn't think it was in the same leagues as Black Seeds of Vengeance, Amongst the Catacombs, or even Annihilation, The Wicked, which I'd say those are my three like go-to NILE albums. Those are my top three. Vile Nilotic Rites wasn't up in those levels, but I did think it was a kind of step forward. I thought it was better than the 2 or 3 releases they'd put out the kind of 10 years before that, which I kind of felt like NILE got to a point where they were going a little bit through the motions. I know they've had like various lineup changes and stuff, and then there was a couple albums where the production was a little bit not so great. So yeah, Vile Nilotic Rites I felt was a step forward. It wasn't like a groundbreaking album, but I thought it was better than what they'd done the last kind of couple albums before that. So I've been following them since around early 2000s.
So you would say like 2/3 of the career is in the pocket for Dave.
Yeah, for sure.
So I would say that you're probably best placed to then lead this review.
I am happy.
You might have 1 or 2 things to say about this.
I have.
And I will approach this with my general fake knowledge and ignorance.
We've also had 2 new band members join since the last album. We've got Zach joining on guitars and vocals, and also Dan Vadim Vaughn joining on bass. He's also been playing in Morbid. He's been playing guitar in Morbid Angel for the last 6 or 7 years. And Brian Kingsland's worth mentioning. He was on the last album. That was his first album with NILE. So he's now had a bit more time to kind of settle in. He contributes both guitars and kind of main vocals to the NILE sound. So Yeah, I was excited to dig into this, to see what a kind of NILE album would sound like in 2024.
We obviously reacted to
Yeah,
the track with the longest title in human history.
we did,
So
yeah.
much so that it kept chopping off on YouTube. Like I'm sure that a reaction video it just chops off after a certain point because it's ran out of characters. I mean, you
Yeah.
couldn't tweet that. You couldn't tweet the title.
Yeah, I was trying not to let my expectations get too wild, because
It's a
I
killer
feel
track.
like what's that?
I said it was a killer track. We
Yeah, it
reacted to,
was,
so
and
like we both come off
yeah,
that buzzing. So there is that little bit of did they just lead with their best foot,
yeah.
or are they teasing something special?
I was once I heard that track, I didn't listen to anything else. Like I
Alright.
didn't listen to
Out.
any other. Yeah. I think like with a band like this that kind of sit on that like upper tier of death metal bands, with the highlight albums they've had in the past, you almost like automatically expect it to be incredible. So aside from the track that we reacted to, I like purposefully just didn't want to get too hyped for the rest of the album, so I just stopped after that. And I think on that track we heard, and now having heard the full album, from a like technical perspective, this could be the definitely the tightest they've ever sounded. Like when Steely or Stelly or Vultures, the first track comes out of the gate and just launches into some of the most like breakneck material NILE I've ever released. I was just like, oh my god! Like, not only is it fast, but the precision here is just ridiculous. Like NILE albums are usually to an extent quite surgical, but this was delivered with like pinpoint accuracy, not a note out of place. It's very methodical. The guitar work was just incredible. I actually usually when I stick an album on, when it's something we're reviewing, I'll just hit play and just let it go. With this album, I played that first track like 3 times. When it finished, I was like back to the start and back to the start again. I was just like, this is fucking awesome, and I listened to the track 3 times just to kind of take it all in because there's so much going on. It's very riffy. It's very discordant in places, but then it switches into parts that are very detailed in the guitar work. Just all over the fretboard. I don't think there was a single note of the guitar that doesn't get played on that first track. It's just ridiculous. There's a lovely big slow section in the middle that gets really disgusting. And NILE are so good at adding these sections that just ooze that kind of like really like ominous kind of dissonance. But it never lasts for too long. Then it's back to just like rapid as fuck riffs and drums. And I think because of the kind of technical level of this, it did take me longer than usual to get accustomed to it. There's so much going on in this album. But
Because there's been years since I listened to NILE, but like I was trying to cast my memory back, and one of the first things that kind of came into my mind is this a traditional death metal album, or is this more verging on technical death metal?
I would say so.
But like in a march shift, because I can't remember them sounding as detailed as this.
No.
I just remember being all about the riffs and that guy that has the sharp ice pick fucking guitar thing for stabbing vampires. But I couldn't remember the riffs being as like to the point where I wondered if there had been personnel changes. I don't keep up to date with it, and I wondered if they had acquired a new guitarist, because it did feel like a sea change in that direction. Not that it's unwelcome, but it was kind of almost whiplash edition. It was kind of.
Yeah, I think Carl Sanders has been like the main guy. I think he does most of the writing, but I do remember, I'm sure, reading an interview that on the last album it was a more kind of band effort. It was a more kind of group effort. And I don't know if they've went the same way on this one or if he's taken the reins on the writing. I'm not entirely sure, but yeah, it is highly technical. I'd say more technical than normal. But there are repeating parts on this as well. And the more you hear it, the more you'll start to kind of catch on to these little sections that repeat themselves. I loved that first track, how it ended. I loved the kind of thunder and lightning at the end of the first track. I thought it was like a real like kind of gloominess to the end. It just added a really cool tone to the ending. There's also, and again, I don't remember a lot of this from before, but I'd say there's a lot more kind of kind of grind characteristics on this as well, which I wasn't really anticipating on this album. NILE predominantly sit within that kind of death metal, technical death metal kind of sphere, and they do hit like insane speeds at times, but this has sections where they actually fully kind of commit to the grind, small bursts of it, but it adds real like intense moments to the album. I've said it before, but George Colias is one of the most kind of brutal drummers in death metal. Like, this guy is a fucking machine. There is nothing that he can't do. Like, and usually you kind of find like drummers who can deliver this level of technicality in their playing. Sometimes they lack a bit of human feel, you know, like it can almost come across as mechanical. Don't get that at all with this. Like, there's a fluidity to his style that's just like the perfect balance of technical and kind of natural flow. But I mean, it's pretty much every album he's been on, I've found him to be a real highlight. And again, he's an absolute highlight on this album for sure. I lost count of how many times I just shook my head at how fucking ridiculous the drumming was.
There was one point he had a fill, and I'm sure, in my brain, not being a drummer, I imagine what that looks like on a kit, and you might as well have just went like this on the kit, because it's at that speed, it was so many tom hits. Yeah. It was like a standard roll fill-in, but he must have went around the houses like 3 times. In the space it would have taken a normal person to go around 1, and it does get to a point where you're just like, it's like you feel like you just have to exhale, like. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, the other thing I want to point out is there's like a short interlude on the track, like a kind of mid-album kind of breather track, which is fine. They've done a lot of that in the past. However, I want to mention track 3, To Strike with Secret Fang.
I love this, because this is like, there's a kind of, I didn't do the, because it's a, almost dry heave there, it was a stream. Hate streams. This is a stream. So, like, I don't get my usual, I shove it on my phone, but I don't get my usual, the entire album is this length. Sort of thing. So, like, the first 2 tracks combined are over 10 minutes, right? So I was like, this is like, there's fucking 11 songs on this. This is gonna run long. And then track 3 kicked in with what can only be described as like a burst of fucking short violence. To the point where I was like, that is such a fucking clever placement. Like, such a clever place, because that's exactly what the album needed at the exact point it needed it. It's fucking vicious.
It really is. I wasn't expecting it. It's like just a ball hair under 2 minutes in length, which is, that is short for NILE tracks. That is short. Like, they don't tend to do short songs. I couldn't remember them ever doing anything as short as this. I think they had a track on Black Seeds of Vengeance which was like kind of like just over 2 minutes, but that's you're talking like 24 years ago. And when I heard it, I was like, man, like, I'd love to hear them do more of this. Like, it's just like, as you imagine, it doesn't hold back on the speed. It's a little bit more kind of like blackened in the guitar work as well, but it's just one of those like short, sharp, to the point, hits you like a fucking hail of bullets. And I loved it. I felt like they could have, or like going forward, they could include more of that. Maybe just like a 2 or 3, maybe like really short tracks.
It's like the NILE equivalent of like when Napalm Death do the 3-second songs.
It
really is on the album. It like hits you hit, and you're just like, fuck.
Because everything else is like ranging from like 4 minutes to fucking 9 minutes. And you get a lot more diversity on those tracks for sure, but like the short blasts are really cool as well, just to break things up. The other thing we get on this release is a human choir, which
why not?
Wasn't expecting that either. Both
when in Egypt, Dave.
Well, yeah, absolutely.
Don't know if that's a quote.
Nakada 2, I'm not sure if you pronounce that, Enter the Golden Age, and also Overlords of the Black Earth. They both have it. And it's a really cool addition to both of those tracks. Obviously, it kind of thickens up the kind of vocal parts, but it gives you this really kind of grand feel, which does feed into the kind of Egyptology kind of theme on the album as well. And it's something a little bit more experimental that they're adding into the mix. I thought it was really cool. I thought Overlords of the Black Earth was fucking awesome though. That track is just incredible. The chord progressions are unreal. Like, I love the fact that NILE don't like hang around on those bottom 2 frets repetitively. Like a lot of death metal bands stick to that area, and they just kind of play around that kind of part of the neck. NILE riffs continually move up the fretboard higher and higher, and I think it's like quite a distinguishing characteristic of their sound. I think it keeps things interesting. It also separates them from a lot of other death metal bands. As far as I mentioned the Egypt themes, I think there have been NILE albums in the past that have had a more potent Egyptian theme on their albums for sure. But it is still here on this album. You do get it on kind of little hints of the guitar work, especially the lead work.
Yeah.
You get the odd like kind of gong going off every now and again. I think that kind of vocal choir and layering also adds a bit of the Egyptian feel to the tracks. And there are tracks that go heavier on it. I think it was Under the Curse of the One God. It's got bits of percussion. We've got what sounded like kind of more traditional Egyptian instrumentation. Online, it might be there's an instrument called a simsimia, which is like a stringed instrument. It's a bit like a lyre. That's a lyre.
And not a Henry Rollins song.
Yeah, fucking liar. Not that kind of liar. Actually, though, after that track, the album actually does start to slow down a touch. Up until the last 4 tracks, the album is pretty full on. It keeps the pace for the majority. There are slow sections added in, but they are somewhat measured on the album. I think from Doctrine of Last Things, we get much more variance in the tempo, where they sit in the slower groove for longer periods, and the riffs are almost slightly more streamlined on those tracks. They are awesome tracks. I love this side to NILE. Initially, when I heard it, I found it a little bit weird that they kept most of that material to the end of the album, and I was like, would this have been better if they'd spread out those tracks a little more throughout the album to give it more balance? And then more and more I've listened to this quite a lot, this album. The more and more I listened to it, the more I was like, I actually started to get excited as we approached that end part of the album, because I knew what was coming up, and it's those much kind of slower parts where they're just kind of grooving out. So there might be kind of method to their madness there. I'm not entirely sure, but initially I wasn't sure, but I think I'm kind of starting to kind of come around to the way they've kind of ordered the album. Vocally, this is elite death metal, man. Like, I know, like, from over the years, fans have moaned, shall we say, when Dallas left the band. He left the band 2016-ish, around that area. He did a large portion of the kind of low-end kind of growls on the album. Carol still does the low stuff as well, but Dallas did do a large portion of that. What I would say is, though, this album is one of the most varied vocally they've done in a long time. It's got it all vocally, to be honest. You've got Brian Kingsland, who sounds fucking incredible on this. His tone is visceral. He's only gotten better since the previous album, since Vile Melodic Rites. I think I love his enunciation on this. Like, you can make out every word of this, but then you've got all this additional stuff that takes it up another notch. You've now got basically 3 vocalists in this band, with Carol, the kind of front man, Brian and Zach also doing Carol's not the front man, Carol's a guitarist. Brian's the front man with Carol and Zach. So you've got this kind of like 3-pronged kind of vocal attack, and the kind of gutturals have paired up with Brian's higher register are awesome, like really kind of demonic sounding. That choir effect sounds huge, and then you've got like guest vocals on this as well from Mike Brazil, who he sings on Carol Sanders' solo album, and you've got Jason Hohenstein from Legion of Lunacy also contributing vocals, and combined, like, it adds just so much contrast and texture to this album. I can't see how, as a NILE fan, you can complain about this vocally. It's fucking awesome. Last thing
You've
I want
not
to
met the internet, have you?
I haven't. Yeah. There's always something.
Check the comments.
Last thing I want to mention, the solos. Like I mentioned, the guitar work is great on this album, but special mention to the solos. They never overdo it, but very well placed out the album. I love the way they pan the solos from ear to ear, depending on who it is that's kind of soloing. And they also work as really great kind of transitional pieces into the next parts of the tracks that they're on as well. Final thing. The production. Love the production on this. Like, you could eat your dinner off this production. To be honest, it is clean. Great job from Carol Sanders and then Mark Lewis, who's mixed and mastered it as well. It's got a really cool weight to it. You know, it's punchy, but everything is super clear on the mix. Even like there's the kind of interlude track with the acoustic guitars; those sounded fucking awesome. So yeah, I thought this was awesome. Like, I really did. I wasn't disappointed with this album in the slightest. I think this is a return to form, to be honest. Like, I mentioned the 3 albums that I loved from their past, the kind of early albums, but this I feel is up there. What about yourself? What did you make of this? I wasn't sure how this was going to go down. And
is there any time left to talk?
You've got about 10 seconds.
Yeah, I've we mentioned before in our kind of long preamble. Yeah, like NILE have been on the radar for the longest time. I remember like early music videos from them and whatnot, and being mostly because of as someone who was for a long time fascinated by Egyptian history, can see where we had different upbringings. Like the fact that they lean so heavily into the kind of iconography and kind of lyrical themes and storytelling around that particular part of history, it makes it interesting to me when bands can it's not just a gimmick with them, they kind of live and breathe it through their music. Because there are plenty of bands that do the gimmick on top of what they're doing. Not that I'm saying Megadeth are a gimmick band, watch more hate mail coming in here. But when you have to redesign your icon to be futuristic because this album's got a little bit of the future, you know what I mean, that sort of shit does my tits in. Where they seem to be fully invested with it. Musically, it was always, whenever I tried to get into it, it was always so fucking imposing. Time has won out with me in quite a lot of death metal, where I can appreciate a little bit more of, believe it or not, the nuance in the music. And my concern, having listened to a couple of tracks earlier on, was that there was a huge increase in the technical element, and that is like a boner killer for me. Technical death metal is just not my brand of death metal. I appreciate everything that goes into it, but I tend to feel at the end of it that I have essentially listened to something that's lost its character. Not in the case of this one. This album is bursting with character. And I think you've hit a couple of the big touch points in this one. I think, first and foremost for me, the vocal diversity on this is what makes this stand out. It's what saves it. Had this been one vocal style delivery all the way through it, I would have probably chopped a point off my score straight away. But the fact that you have these different levels, whether it's vocal choir performances, different tonal aspects, which actually complement what they're doing. They don't always sit exactly how you would expect them to. Sometimes that lower vocal, sits over a fucking horrific groove, but sometimes it will come in over something a bit more riffy and a bit more blasty. Subsequently, they will hit high screams over those riffy blasty bits, but also bring them down into, you mentioned before, kind of these nasty, slow, chunky, discordant sections. So the fact that they're switching it up all the way through makes it engaging enough to keep things going. I sometimes feel that, especially if you're playing an instrument and doing vocals, in death metal, the instrument tends to take priority over the vocal because you can just get away with being monotone. So I love that aspect. I love the flow of this album as well. I think the interludes, whether they are vicious and fast as fuck, or they are more based around the idea of building up almost acoustic style instruments, are quite clean picked sections, really add to it, because the songs later on in sections will lean back into those kind of quieter, clean pick sections as well as kind of through lines through them. So once again, it's thinking about composition and flow, and it has that. I, like yourself, loved the back end of this album because I felt exhausted by the midway point just from the sheer power of it. But I think NILE carefully hide a lot of that ability to just switch into what I would class as nasty groove death metal, and they can spin it out whenever they really want to. And the fact they lean a little bit more on that on the back half of the album is really interesting. Also adds to the diversity of the overall sound. Like yourself, I thought the production was great. I think the guitar work is super impressive. Love the solos on this one. I was all full of character, all very unique sounding, and all perfectly aligned to the tracks. I'm not a drummer, right? But even I can sit back and say the guy is fucking ridiculous, and like there are bits that it boggles my mind how someone can move around a kit as quick as that. Yes, there has been probably more than likely there's been a little bit of tweaking and modulation and like raising of levels to make them align, but it's clear there's a guy playing it. It's not a machine playing it.
Yeah.
And it gives it gravitas. You can tell the bits where he's really fucking hitting in on a groove, the bits where he's just playing as fast as he possibly can. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say at the end of this one I am a reformed NILE fan. I wasn't like rushing to listen to the back catalogue, but this could be one of the first kind of quasi-technical death metal albums I've heard in a while where I got to the end and it was like, it's fucking great. Like, I got the personality, I got everything the band were trying to convey, but not at the expense of trying to be the most technically impressive band I've ever heard in my entire life.
Yeah.
And that doesn't shortchange anything the band is doing. It's of a very fucking high caliber. Mind blown to think that they're in their 30th year. That to me does not compute. But and we say this a lot, and it does get a bit cliche. You kind of feel like there's still a lot in the tank. Like,
yeah.
You know, like very similar to those last couple of Cannibal Corpse albums, when you're like, they're still doing it, and it still sounds great.
Yeah.
The next album could be another 5-star, and for them, the next album from them could easily. I think they've got a formula. I would agree with you. I think I would love to hear more short, sharp bursts of pure aggression, which just feel like middle sections of songs. It's like they've almost taken a middle section of a song and like that. You're a song. I'm cool with that. I'm absolutely cool with that. So yeah, I think once again, if you're a death metal fan, I don't know how you can't not enjoy this. Lineup changes aside, I thought it was really good. So yeah.
Nice. So scores for the latest NILE album. Yeah, this is finger looking good, Duncan.
We're sticking that way.
I think this is the best thing they've done since Annihilation of the Wicked. It's definitely more technical and probably more proficient than those early albums, but it doesn't lack any of the brutality that they had either. Is it as good as Black Seeds or Amongst the Catacombs? I mean, that's like, those albums set an incredibly high bar. Plus, I've been listening to those albums for over 20 years, so they are kind of ingrained at this point. I think it's very close. I think this is it's in the top 5 for NILE's albums for sure. I'm going to go 4.5 out of 5 on this one, but that's not to say that score might creep up with more time, to be honest. I loved this. I thought it was really fucking good. What about yourself? What are you thinking?
I'm marginally below you. I think this is a big, powerful 4-star album, which I didn't expect coming into this, and I didn't expect a couple of songs in either. I was expecting the drop-off point for my interest, when it gets to the point where I'm just like that. Right, it's just too ridiculous now. It doesn't come on this album ever. Like as far as they stretch everything they can do in a track, you go with it wholly, which is a very difficult art to do, especially when playing the level of technicality they are.
Sure, and like usually an album of this technicality and this length, I mean, it's over 50 minutes long.
Well, this is the other thing. Generally, like my tolerance for technical death metal isn't great, but if you start going over the 45-minute mark, you're pretty much consigning yourself to the dustbin of my brain. You know what I mean? I get to a point where I'm like, what are we doing here? And this one holds my interest from start to finish. I think it's because of all the detail. It's a very detail crafted album on all instrumentation, all keys. I didn't really mention the keyboard stuff here is subtle and it's excellent. And the choice of vocals and whatnot in their placement. It's a very well crafted album.
So that's the new album from NILE, which comes out on August 23rd. The Underworld Awaits Us All. I'll put links below to the band, to the pre-order, all that sort of stuff. You can check it out. We will hopefully see you in Glasgow in September, NILE. You are heading up the UK.
You seen them before?
I've never seen them. That's
right. So it's a bucket list for you.
Yeah, it's so weird that I've never seen this band before. After listening to them for like over 20 years. So yeah, I'll definitely be heading to Slay in September to see you guys. Can't wait. That is the review. Thank you for checking it out. Much appreciated. We'll be back with another review very soon. But until then, take care. Speak to you soon.
Bye, everyone.